The city felt like a heartbeat pulsing beneath my feet. Every honk of a car horn, every shouted conversation drifting out of a cafe or apartment window was a reminder I wasn't in the quiet suburbs anymore. I stood on the cracked sidewalk in front of our tiny new apartment, gripping the strap of my bag like it might anchor me to this new life. My best friend Kira bounced beside me, all spark and laughter and caffeine-fueled excitement. "We actually did it," she grinned, keys dangling from her fingers. "Lena, we moved." I laughed, but it came out shaky. "Yeah, we did." The truth was, I was terrified. Not of the city, not even of failing, but of what it meant to really begin. Adulthood. Independence. Responsibility. It sounded exciting in theory, but in practice, it meant I had to figure out everything from rent to taxes to finding a grocery store that didn't smell like expired meat. The first few weeks felt like we were playing house. We burned pasta, forgot to buy toilet paper, and argued over who left the dishes soaking too long. But there were also rooftop wine nights, spontaneous dancing in the kitchen, and job interviews that didn't go completely off the rails. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Then Kira's mom got sick. It happened so fast, one phone call and everything changed. I watched her pack her bags with trembling hands and a clenched jaw, swearing she'd be back in a week. But I think we both knew she wouldn't. Family came first. I hugged her tight on the sidewalk and watched her cab disappear into the traffic, feeling like the city suddenly got a lot colder. I was alone. For the first time in my life, completely, utterly alone. I tried to keep my routine. Went to my job at the coffee shop, smiled at customers, avoided the creepy manager's stares. I walked to the park on weekends, sometimes just to feel less invisible. That's where I met him. Adrian. He was sitting under an oak tree with a sketchbook in his lap, charcoal on his fingers, and a faint smudge across his cheek. I wasn't going to say anything. I'd passed by him a few times before and always admired the way he seemed so absorbed in his art, like the world could crash around him and he wouldn't flinch. But that day, I dropped my water bottle right in front of him. Classic. He looked up, smiled, and handed it to me. "You dropped this," he said. His voice was soft but confident, and something about the way he looked at me made my stomach do a tiny backflip. "Thanks," I mumbled, suddenly very aware of how windblown my hair was. "You're, really good at drawing." He smiled again, this time more amused. "Wanna see?" I sat beside him under that tree for over an hour. He showed me pages of cityscapes, portraits, strange little creatures he said lived in the corners of his imagination. We talked about everything and nothing: books, music, the weird smell of the subway. When I finally stood up, the sun was dipping low, and I felt like I'd woken up from a dream. From that day on, we kept running into each other. At first it seemed like coincidence. Then it started to feel like fate. He'd bring me coffee after my shift. I'd bring him snacks while he sketched. He walked me home one night and kissed me on the steps, slow, warm, like he wasn't in a rush to be anywhere else. And just like that, he became my world. He was attentive, generous, intense in a way that made me feel seen. For once, I didn't have to carry everything myself. He helped fix things around the apartment, cooked me meals that weren't just toast, and listened when I talked about missing Kira or feeling lost in the city. There were small things. He'd get distant sometimes, or dodge questions about his past, but I told myself everyone had shadows. He was with me now, and that was enough. When I texted Kira about him, she wrote back, "Don't disappear into someone else, Lena. Remember who you are." I ignored the warning, because falling for Adrian felt like the one thing in my life that was actually going right. At first, Maya was just a name. A soft exhale from Adrian's lips when he mentioned old memories, or a story he'd half tell before changing the subject. I didn't press. It felt too soon, too invasive. Everyone had a past, and I was determined not to be the kind of girlfriend who treated history like a threat. But as the weeks passed, her name kept surfacing. "She used to love this band," he'd say casually as we listened to a song on his playlist. Or, "Maya always hated this restaurant," when we walked by a sushi place on our block. Sometimes it was more wistful, like when we passed a bookstore and he stopped walking just long enough to stare at the window. We used to come here every Sunday. I smiled through it all, pretending it didn't knot me. She's not a threat, Lena, he finally said one night as we lay tangled in bed. Maya's part of my past, but that's all. Then why does she feel so present? I whispered. He sighed, kissing my forehead like I was being foolish. My family still talks to her. It's awkward, yeah, but we were together a long time. They got used to her. I nodded. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to be understanding. So I told myself it was fine when she commented on his Instagram photos with inside jokes I didn't understand. I let it go when he answered her texts late at night, claiming she was just checking in about his niece's birthday or some vague family matter. I even pretended not to notice how quickly he shut his laptop when I walked in the room. Then one evening, I came home to find her sitting in our living room. I stopped cold in the doorway. She looked like she belonged there, legs crossed on the couch, mug in her hand, chatting with Adrian's sister, who had just dropped by. Adrian introduced us like it was the most normal thing in the world. Lena, this is Maya. Maya, Lena. She stood and offered her hand. Her nails were perfect. Her smile was sharper than it needed to be. I've heard so much about you. It was the most disarming thing a woman like her could say. I shook her hand, but I felt like I was being assessed, measured. Found lacking. The whole interaction lasted less than 10 minutes, but it lingered in my chest long after she left. When I asked Adrian why she was here, he waved it off. She came with my sister. I didn't even know she was coming. But he didn't look surprised when she showed up. From then on, she was always somewhere close. At his nephew's birthday. At his parents' barbecue. She always smiled like we were friends, but there was something performative about it, like she was playing a part only I couldn't decode. She'd make comments like, "Remember that trip we took upstate, Adrian?" Or, "You still make that spicy pasta?" All with a sweet little glance my way, like she was reminiscing, not undermining. I started to question everything. Not just her, but him. Why did he let her get so close? Why did he keep me from certain gatherings, only to later mention she'd been there? Was I the one who was too sensitive? Too paranoid? Then, one night over dinner, completely out of nowhere, Adrian looked at me and said, "Marry me." I blinked, fork suspended in midair. What? He reached across the table, took my hand. I mean it. Let's get married. Right now. You and me. I laughed nervously. Adrian, are you serious? Dead serious. There was no ring. No speech. Just an intensity in his eyes I'd never seen before. And against every voice in my head that begged me to pause, to think, to ask why the rush, I said yes. We eloped 2 weeks later. Kira called me, frantic. Lena, what are you doing? You barely know him. What about Maya? Doesn't this feel rushed? But I didn't want to admit it. Not to her, not to myself. Because if I admitted the doubt, I'd have to admit I might have made a mistake. And I wasn't ready for that yet. The first time I saw the 2 pink lines, I stared at them like they were written in another language. I sat on the edge of my childhood bathtub, clutching the test in trembling fingers, trying to wrap my head around what it meant. I wasn't scared. Not yet. I was stunned, overwhelmed, a little breathless. But underneath all that, there was a strange kind of calm. A spark. I imagined Adrian's face lighting up. I imagined our baby with his dark eyes and maybe my laugh. I imagined tiny socks and midnight feedings and the life we'd start together, the one that might finally cement us as solid and unshakable. I held that dream close as I drove home. The moment I stepped through the door, I knew something was off. Adrian sat at the table, arms crossed, his phone beside him. He didn't look up. No hello. No smile. Hey, I said softly. I have something to tell you. He stood up so suddenly his chair scraped the tile. Where were you? I told you I visited my mom. Just for the weekend. I needed a breather. His eyes narrowed. And Damien was there, too, right? I blinked, confused. Yeah, of course he was. He lives there. Why? Adrian's face twisted into something I didn't recognize. Don't play dumb. You think I'm an idiot? That I wouldn't find out? Find out what? He shoved his phone toward me. On the screen was a message thread, screenshots. From Maya. My stomach dropped. She said she saw you too. Said you were acting weird. Too close. Said you've always had some sick crush on him. For a second, I couldn't even breathe. Wait. Maya sent you this? Adrian, she's lying. Damien is my stepbrother. That's disgusting. You expect me to believe that? He spat. You disappear for a weekend, come back smiling like nothing happened, and now, what? You've got some big news for me? I tried to hold on to my composure, but my voice cracked. I'm pregnant, Adrian. That's what I came to tell you. Silence fell over the room. I could hear the hum of the fridge, the tick of the old wall clock. He stared at me, eyes hard. It's not mine. What? You heard me. You went home, slept with your damn stepbrother, and now you're trying to pin it on me. My whole body went cold. How can you say that? Why would I ever? Because Maya saw it. And I trust her more than I trust you right now. Something inside me shattered. I stood there, shaking, staring at the man I'd just married, the man who held me through sleepless nights and whispered promises against my skin, and I didn't recognize him. His eyes were full of venom. There was no trace of the Adrian I knew. Maya hates me, I said, my voice barely audible. She's trying to ruin us. She's been trying since day one. And you're letting her. I tried to reason with him. I offered explanations, my words spilling out in frantic bursts. Adrian, this isn't about Damien. You have to understand, you've got it all wrong. Maya has been feeding you lies, twisting everything. Please, just listen to me. But no matter how many times I said it, no matter how hard I tried to make him understand, his eyes grew colder, more distant. I don't need to listen to this, Lena, he snapped, pushing the pregnancy test aside as though it were something revolting. You've already made your choices. Don't make me the fool in this too. I felt my heart crack. It was as though everything I had given him, everything we had built, was slipping away in that single, hollow moment. I had hoped, foolishly, that the truth would clear the air, that Adrian would see through the lies, that he would believe me. But he didn't. He believed Maya. He trusted her more than he trusted me. My voice trembled as I continued, You're wrong. You're letting her destroy us. I love you. This baby, this is ours. Adrian's face twisted, rage bubbling up like a storm inside of him. You're a liar. I don't know who you are anymore. I'm done with this. I stepped back, my breath catching in my throat. You're not even listening. I'm telling you the truth. There's a paternity test, we can. Enough. He shouted, standing up so abruptly that his chair crashed to the floor. I don't want a test. I want nothing from you anymore. You've already ruined everything. I felt the words cut through me like shards of glass. I had never seen him like this, never heard him speak to me with so much venom. It was like the man I had fallen in love with was suddenly replaced by a stranger, someone incapable of hearing me, incapable of understanding the depths of my love. The silence that followed was suffocating. We stood there, staring at each other, neither of us knowing what to say next. It was as though the ground beneath us had shifted and the cracks were growing wider. I couldn't breathe. My chest was tight, like I was drowning in the weight of all the things we couldn't fix. How had we gone from making future plans to standing in a place where everything felt broken beyond repair? Adrian, please, I whispered, my voice cracking. Please, don't do this. We can fix this. We can move past the lies. But he didn't move. He didn't even flinch. Instead, he turned his back on me, his shoulders rigid, his hands clenched. I want a divorce. The words hit me like a punch in the gut, knocking the wind out of me. Divorce. My mind spun, unable to process it. This wasn't just a disagreement. It wasn't just a bad argument. This was the end of everything we had ever shared, everything I thought we were building. He walked out of the room, leaving me standing there, the empty space between us growing wider with every second. I could hear his footsteps growing fainter, his retreat a cruel reminder of how quickly things could unravel. I sank onto the couch, my hands trembling. I had no idea what to do, where to turn. Everything felt foreign, like I was waking up from a nightmare I couldn't escape. I could feel the weight of my pregnancy pressing down on me, the future that had once seemed so promising now slipping through my fingers. How had it come to this? I stared at the ring on my finger, the symbol of everything I thought we had built. The man I had trusted, the man I had loved with all my heart, was gone. And I was left holding the broken pieces of a marriage that had never stood a chance. I didn't even know how long I sat there, lost in the haze of my own thoughts. Time seemed to stretch, the minutes dragging by an agonizing slowness. When I finally stood up, my legs felt shaky, like I might fall at any moment. I had to get out of there. I had to leave before I let myself break even more. I grabbed my bag, my keys, and walked out of the apartment, not looking back. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't care. All I knew was that I needed to escape. I needed to get away from him, from the lies, from the betrayal that had turned everything upside down. I ended up at the bus station, the cool air biting at my skin as I waited for the first bus to anywhere. I didn't have a destination in mind, didn't even know where it would take me. All I wanted was to be somewhere far from him, somewhere I could breathe. But as the bus pulled away, my chest tightened again. I could feel the weight of everything pressing down on me, the loss, the pain, the fear of what was coming. And as the city passed by in the window, I realized that nothing would ever be the same again. The town I returned to wasn't the same one I'd left. Or maybe I wasn't the same. The streets were familiar, worn sidewalks and peeling storefronts, but I moved through them like a ghost. My mother tried her best, tiptoeing around my silence, offering casseroles and tea I couldn't bring myself to drink. The miscarriage came quietly, just a few weeks after I left Adrian. I didn't even cry at first. I think my body knew before my heart did, like it couldn't carry the weight of everything all at once. After the hospital, I disappeared for a while. Days blurred into nights. I curled up in bed and let grief settle into my bones. I wasn't just mourning the baby. I was mourning everything: my marriage, my sense of self, my trust. It was all gone. There was no ceremony for that kind of loss, no burial for the version of me who believed love could be enough. Eventually, time forced me to get up. Grief might be patient, but bills weren't. I took a job at the local bookstore. Small, quiet, a place where no one asked too many questions. I shelved novels and rang up paperbacks for wide-eyed teenagers, grateful for the anonymity. It was in that stillness that I started to breathe again. I didn't meet Marcus in some magical moment. He wasn't a knight riding in on a white horse. He was just a man standing in the self-help aisle with a fidgety little boy tugging at his sleeve. I was reshelving returns, minding my business, when the boy Owen asked loudly if books were boring forever. Marcus apologized with a laugh, and I smiled for the first time in weeks. That small moment bloomed into coffee chats, casual run-ins, and, eventually, dates that didn't feel like performances. Marcus was steady in a way I'd never known. Thoughtful. Present. He didn't come with fireworks or intensity. He came with quiet consistency, checking in, walking me home, making me laugh when I thought that part of me was gone forever. Owen was cautious around me at first. He clung to Marcus like a shadow, uncertain about where I fit into their little world. But over time, he warmed. I learned how to braid his hair after bath time. We built pillow forts and made pancakes that were more burnt than fluffy. He started calling me Elle, then Lena, and then, one night, without ceremony, Mom. I didn't cry right away. I just hugged him, arms wrapped tight around his small frame, and whispered, "I love you too." Marcus proposed on a spring morning as Owen ran ahead of us down a trail lined with wildflowers. There was no grand gesture, no audience. Just the three of us and a ring held out with shaking hands. "Yes," I whispered, without hesitation. We married in a small garden ceremony. I wore a dress with soft sleeves and no veil, nothing to hide. My mother cried. Owen danced with cake on his nose. And for the first time in years, I felt like I belonged somewhere. Life after that was beautifully ordinary. School drop-offs. Grocery lists. Movie nights on the couch with Owen snoring between us. It was the kind of life I had once thought I'd never have again. I barely thought about Adrian anymore. When I did, it felt like remembering someone else's life. The pain was still there, a scar beneath the surface, but it didn't control me. He was a chapter I'd closed, a ghost in a book I no longer opened. Until he came back. It started with a message request on a social media app one rarely used. A name I hadn't seen in years. Adrian, is he mine? Just 3 words. And yet they sent a chill down my spine. I didn't respond. I blocked him. Thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. A week later, my mom called me, her voice tight. He came to the house, Lena. He was asking about a boy. About your son. My hands trembled. He what? He said he just wants to know the truth. I felt sick. Adrian wasn't supposed to be able to reach us. He wasn't part of this life. This family. I hung up the phone and looked at Marcus, who was watching me with concern. I told him everything. His jaw clenched, but his hand found mine. We'll protect Owen, he said. No matter what. And just like that, the past I thought I'd buried had clawed its way back. There was a heaviness in my chest that wouldn't go away after the call from my mother. I barely slept that night, lying in bed beside Marcus with my eyes fixed on the ceiling, listening to the hum of the heater and Owen's gentle breathing through the baby monitor we still used, even though he was 8. I used to think that kind of restlessness only came from new motherhood, listening for every creak of the floorboards, every distant car. But no, it was fear. Real fear. The kind that sinks into your bones and sits there, pulsing with every heartbeat. I'd blocked Adrian online, of course. Every account I could think of. But somehow, he kept finding new ways to peek in. He followed our school's social media page. He liked a photo I was tagged in by an old coworker from the bookstore. His digital footprints kept appearing, like echoes I couldn't silence. Then he showed up. It was a Saturday morning, and we were visiting my mom, just for a short stop before Owen's karate class. Marcus stayed in the car to answer a work call while I went inside. My mother met me at the door with a tight-lipped expression, eyes darting toward the street. He's here, she whispered. What? I froze. In the backyard. He just walked up like he belonged here, demanding to see the boy. The blood drained from my face. Where's Owen? In the car with Marcus. I didn't let him near the window. I moved quickly, stepping through the kitchen and sliding open the back door. And there he was. Adrian, standing in the middle of the grass like he'd been waiting for me. His face was thinner, more angular, the charm long gone from his features. There was something wild in his eyes, something desperate. Lena, he said, like we were still connected in some awful, broken way. I need to see him. He's mine. I deserve to know him. I stepped outside, the cold biting at my arms, but I didn't flinch. He's not your child. You need to leave. You never let me explain. I was angry. I was lied to. I was confused. And you chose to believe Maya, I said flatly. You chose to walk away when I needed you. I lost that child, Adrian. I lost our child. And you were gone. Something flickered across his face, some fractured recognition of the damage he'd done. You didn't tell me. You weren't there to tell, I snapped. And Owen isn't yours. He's Marcus's son and mine. You don't have a place in this family. He stepped forward, and I instinctively moved back. He's mine, Lena. I know it. I've seen pictures. I can tell. You're wrong, I said, steadying my voice. And you're scaring me. The screen door slid open behind me. Marcus. His voice was calm, but his stance was protective. You need to leave. Now. Adrian's eyes shifted. He looked at Marcus like he was just a placeholder, like he didn't matter. I'll get a lawyer. I'll do a DNA test. You think you can keep him from me? You can't. I almost laughed from how surreal it was. You think I haven't been through that nightmare already? Medical records, paternity tests, everything. I've got the paperwork to prove he's not yours. You don't scare me anymore. Marcus stepped forward. You're trespassing. The police will be here in less than 5 minutes. Adrian's face twisted. His eyes, once soft and expressive, were now cold and sharp, like glass. He didn't say another word. He turned and walked down the side of the house and disappeared into the street. Marcus locked every door that night. I sat beside Owen's bed, watching him sleep, brushing my fingers through his hair. He had no idea what was circling around us, no idea how close danger had come. And I intended to keep it that way. The next morning, we went to the police. They took a statement. They were polite, concerned even, but ultimately said what I feared they would. Unless he threatens you directly or tries to take your son, our hands are tied. I felt like screaming. So we prepared. We alerted Owen's school, provided pictures of Adrian, instructed staff not to release Owen to anyone but Marcus or me. We installed security cameras at the house. I started walking through life with one eye always over my shoulder, because I knew Adrian wasn't done. Not yet. I'd never realized how loud peace could be until it was gone. The hum of morning cartoons in the living room, the clink of cereal bowls, the rustle of backpacks being zipped, those sounds used to be my comfort. Now, every noise felt sharp. I found myself looking out the window constantly, flinching at passing cars, memorizing unfamiliar license plates. It started subtly at first. A black car parked across the street 2 mornings in a row. A man who lingered just a bit too long at the gas station near Owen's school. The feeling that eyes were on us even when no one was visible. I wanted to believe it was paranoia. I told myself I was being dramatic. But Marcus believed me right away. "He's watching," I whispered one night as I double-checked the front door lock for the 3rd time. "I know it. He's waiting for something." Marcus didn't argue. He stood behind me, rubbing my shoulders gently, and said, "Then we get ahead of him. We stay vigilant. We protect Owen." We updated Owen's pickup list at school. Only Marcus, me, and my mother were allowed to get him. I met with the principal and showed them Adrian's picture. She promised to notify the staff. We sent emails to Owen's teachers, to the front desk, even to the janitor. Every adult who might cross paths with Owen knew what Adrian looked like and that he was not to come near. Still, there were moments that made my heart race. A missed call from the school, even if it turned out to be a lunchbox left behind, would send me into panic. One afternoon, Owen mentioned a man in a hoodie watching from the sidewalk near the playground. "Did he say anything to you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "No," Owen said. "He just looked at me, like he knew me." Marcus called the police again. Same answer. "We need a direct threat or attempt," the officer told us, barely looking up from his notepad. "Until then, all we can do is monitor the situation." Monitor. As if we weren't already doing that with every breath. I stopped walking Owen to the gate in the mornings. Instead, Marcus drove him and waited until he was inside the building. I'd wave from the porch, trying not to let Owen see the anxiety behind my smile. At night, I checked the cameras. Over and over. Sometimes I'd catch a figure at the edge of the footage, just far enough that the face was unclear. But I knew it was him. I could feel it in my bones. He was waiting for a moment of weakness. One evening, as I walked to get the mail, I saw the corner of a photo sticking out from under the welcome mat. My blood ran cold. It was a picture of Owen, playing in our backyard. I dropped the rest of the mail, my hands shaking as I rushed back inside. Marcus was on the phone with the school, my mother, and the police within minutes. I sat on the couch, holding that photo like it might catch fire. My skin crawled at the thought of Adrian standing so close, watching us from the shadows, camera in hand. The police came and took the photo. They promised to patrol the neighborhood more frequently. But I could see it in their eyes' doubt. They didn't understand the depth of Adrian's obsession. They didn't know what it felt like to have your life rewritten by someone else's delusion. We didn't tell Owen what was happening. Not fully. He knew something wasn't right, but we kept it vague. We told him not to talk to strangers, to stay with his teacher until we picked him up. He nodded like a soldier receiving orders. I hated that he had to grow up even a little faster. Every night, Marcus and I lay in bed, too tense to sleep. "He won't stop," I whispered once, staring at the ceiling. "Not until he takes something from me." Marcus turned to me, his hand finding mine in the dark. "Then we don't give him the chance." Still, sleep never came easily. Because deep down I knew. Adrian wasn't just watching. He was planning. The morning started like any other. Owen complained that his socks were too itchy, Marcus burned the toast again, and I had to chase a juice box that rolled under the fridge. Normal chaos. The kind that used to annoy me before fear rewired my brain. Now, I welcomed it, these loud, messy, real moments that meant we were still safe. Still whole. Marcus dropped Owen off at school, like always. He waited until our son stepped through the doors and waved back. I kissed them both goodbye and stayed home to finish some remote work, my phone beside me on the desk like a lifeline. I checked the security app twice, then again. Nothing out of place. But the dread I'd been carrying wasn't gone. It never really was anymore. I was stirring a pot of soup when my phone rang. The school's number lit up the screen. My heart seized. "Hello?" "Mrs. Wallace," the voice on the line said, calm but tight. "This is Principal Hart. Is Owen supposed to be picked up early today?" My spoon slipped from my hand and clattered into the sink. "What?" "No." "Why?" "There's a man here. He said there was a family emergency." He gave Owen's full name and said he was on the pickup list. I didn't remember moving, but suddenly I was in the living room, grabbing my keys, shouting for Marcus. "It's him," I told the principal. "That man is not allowed anywhere near my son. Stall him. Don't let him leave." "Yes, ma'am," she said, and then she was gone. Marcus was already grabbing his jacket. We didn't speak much on the drive, just short, clipped sentences. My hands were shaking too badly to text the police, so Marcus called them, explaining the situation as he sped toward the school. Every second felt like it could crack open a different ending. My mind kept flashing between what-ifs. What if they believed him? What if he got Owen into the car? What if this time we were too late? The school came into view just as 2 police cruisers were pulling up. I leapt from the car before it stopped moving. I barely registered the shouting or the flurry of motion at the entrance. What I saw, what stopped me cold, was Owen, safe, standing next to the school receptionist. His cheeks were flushed, his backpack slung over one shoulder, and his little fists clenched tight. He looked at me and burst into tears. I wrapped him in my arms, shielding him from the chaos behind us. "You're okay? I've got you. You're safe." Marcus crouched beside us, his face tight, eyes scanning every inch of Owen like he needed confirmation. The receptionist gently explained that Adrian had tried to convince them Owen needed to leave immediately. Something about a car accident involving me. She said he was calm, persuasive, even charming, but something about the way he rushed the details didn't sit right. "I stalled by asking him to fill out a form," she said. "Then I called you." The police arrested Adrian just outside the building. He had no weapon, but he did have something almost worse. A small bottle of liquid sedative in his coat pocket and 2 first-class plane tickets in his wallet, 1 adult, 1 child. Both for a flight leaving that afternoon. It made my stomach turn. I watched from a distance as the officers cuffed him. Adrian didn't look at me, didn't speak. But there was a look in his eyes, something smug and twisted, like this was all part of some game he thought he could still win. When the officer walked past me with the evidence bag, I caught a glimpse of Owen's school photo. Crumpled. Tucked next to the tickets. I felt sick. Back home, the silence was heavy. Owen sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, Marcus beside him, holding his hand. "I didn't go with him," Owen whispered. "Even when he said it was an emergency." "You did exactly the right thing," I said, brushing his hair back. "I'm so proud of you." That night, I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of tea I didn't drink. I stared out the window at the dark yard, waiting for the adrenaline to wear off. But it didn't. It stayed lodged in my chest, a cruel reminder of how close we'd come. Adrian was in custody now. The police had what they needed. But I knew this wasn't over yet. The next step was court. And I'd be ready. The courtroom smelled like old wood and fear. I'd never been in one before, not like this. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above us, and the stale air made everything feel like it was happening behind glass, distant, muffled, surreal. But I was very much here. And so was he. Adrian sat at the defense table, his suit a size too big and his expression composed, almost detached. But I saw the twitch in his jaw when I entered. I saw how his eyes flicked to Marcus and Owen beside me, then darted away. He didn't look at me long. Cowards never do. The trial moved fast, considering how long this nightmare had dragged on in our lives. The evidence was overwhelming, and for once, the justice system didn't shrug it off. The prosecution presented everything: security footage of him circling the school days before the attempt, the bottle of sedatives found in his coat, the plane tickets, the photo of Owen. It was all there. Tangible. Indisputable. Then came the documents I'd once begged Adrian to consider years ago. Medical records from the miscarriage. The timeline of my pregnancy. Statements from my OB-GYN. The paternity test I'd taken after the baby was lost, after he accused me of things I hadn't even imagined possible. They handed everything over to the court like puzzle pieces, each one fitting into place to build a story I already knew by heart. When the judge read the paternity results aloud, stating clearly that Adrian was not Owen's biological father and had no legal or emotional claim to him, I exhaled. I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath for years. Adrian's lawyer tried to shift blame. He painted a picture of confusion, of heartbreak, of misguided desperation. But nothing stuck. You don't accidentally stalk someone across state lines. You don't accidentally show up to a school with drugs and tickets for an unapproved international flight. And you sure as hell don't claim a child that isn't yours without proof and expect people to sympathize. Then Maya appeared. She wasn't subpoenaed, she volunteered. She came dressed in a tailored suit, her hair in that same slick bun she always wore when she wanted to look important. She sat on the stand, lifted her chin, and tried to spin her own story. I only told Adrian what I saw. Lena was always overly familiar with her stepbrother. It was suspicious. There was a collective silence in the room that felt like pressure before a storm. The prosecutor calmly pulled out the texts. Hundreds of them. Between Maya and Adrian. Conversations where she fueled his paranoia, fed him lies, encouraged him to test her, to watch her, to do whatever it takes. At one point, she even messaged, "Make her pay." Maya's face changed then. Her mask cracked. The courtroom watched her unravel in real time. Under cross-examination, she grew defensive, emotional, then belligerent. Her story shifted. Her voice rose. She snapped at the attorney. Finally, in a moment no one could have predicted, she screamed at Adrian, "You were supposed to love me after. You said we'd be together." Gasps spread like ripples through the room. Her husband, who had been sitting in the back silently until that point, stood up and walked out. Just like that. No words, no theatrics. Just the final, silent collapse of her carefully curated world. It would have felt satisfying if it didn't feel so sad. So toxic and unnecessary. All of it born out of jealousy, of spite, of power games that left a child in danger and a family traumatized. The trial ended with Adrian's sentencing. 5 years in prison, with a restraining order so strict he couldn't send a letter within 100 miles of us without violating it. I sat still, holding Marcus's hand tightly, while Owen colored quietly beside me, blissfully unaware of the gravity of the moment. When the judge banged the gavel, I felt the echo in my bones. Not a loud celebration. Not a victory parade. But a kind of quiet, sturdy justice. One that wrapped around me like armor. Outside the courthouse, the reporters gathered. We didn't stop for questions. I didn't need the world's validation. I had the truth. And more importantly, I had my life back. We drove home in silence. Owen fell asleep in the back seat, his head resting against the window. Marcus reached over and placed a hand on my thigh. I turned to him, tears threatening again, but this time, not from fear. From release. "You did it," he whispered. "You protected him. You protected all of us." I nodded. My voice was too full to speak. That night, we tucked Owen into bed and read his favorite book, just like always. Then Marcus and I sat on the porch in the dark, a bottle of wine between us, and breathed in the quiet. No footsteps in the yard. No cars across the street. No shadows at the window. Just the stillness we had fought so hard to reclaim. It should have ended with the gavel. With the judge's final words echoing in the courtroom and the shuffle of Adrian's footsteps as he was led away in handcuffs. It should have ended when the door slammed shut behind him, leaving us in peace to rebuild what was almost destroyed. But people like Adrian don't know how to end quietly. They always need the last word, even from inside a cage. News traveled fast. Faster than I expected. An officer I'd come to know through the case called me personally to tell me what happened. He was attacked, she said flatly. 3 inmates jumped him in the shower block. They recognized him from the papers, what he did or tried to do. I said nothing. Just listened, phone cold against my cheek. He's not dead, she added. But he's not walking right for a long time. Internal bleeding. Fractured ribs. Multiple contusions. It was bad. I murmured a thank you and hung up. Then I sat very still, alone in the kitchen, and let the information settle. There wasn't satisfaction exactly. Just finality. The echo of a door slamming in my mind. Adrian, once so full of control, of plans, of manipulation, now reduced to a hospital bed behind bars. Not because I wished it on him, but because he invited it. He lived his life like the rules didn't apply to him. Eventually, that catches up to people. And it had. I didn't tell Owen. He was too young, and I refused to let Adrian's shadow taint another moment of his innocence. But I told Marcus. And when I did, he just exhaled long and slow, like something heavy had been lifted from his chest. Now he can't touch us, he said. Not from there. A few days later, I received the email. It slipped through my spam filter somehow. Subject line, still mine. I knew before I opened it who it was from. Maya. I stared at the name, heart oddly calm, like I'd been expecting her. I clicked. The message was venom-laced in smugness. She wrote that Adrian still talked about me, even in jail. That he whispered my name when sedated, that he never stopped loving me. She claimed she visited him weekly and that he belonged to her now. I won, she typed. He's mine. You lost. I stared at the screen, lips curling into something that wasn't quite a smile. It was almost pitiful. That after everything, the lies, the manipulation, the trial, this was all she had. A man behind bars. A twisted fantasy. A trophy she believed she'd earned through sabotage. I replied only once. You didn't win, Maya. You inherited what I discarded. Enjoy the pieces. Then I blocked her. Permanently. No loopholes. No second chances. I deleted the email and scrubbed the account she'd used. That part of my life was over, and I wouldn't leave a single crack for her to slither back through. Still, that night, as I watched Owen sleep, I wondered about the long-term damage people like Adrian and Maya leave behind. Not just the fear, but the way they force you to live on edge. How they shape your decisions long after they're gone. But when I saw Owen curled up peacefully in his blankets, his chest rising and falling in steady rhythm, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. We were safe. The restraining orders were now permanent, upgraded with lifetime clauses given the severity of Adrian's attempted kidnapping and his obsessive behavior. My lawyer made sure of it. Marcus and I also met with a trauma counselor, not because we were unraveling, but because we didn't want to. We wanted tools to stay strong. To rebuild the soft parts of ourselves we'd armored for too long. One afternoon, after school, Owen asked, "Can we go to the lake this summer? The one with the ducks and the ice cream stand?" I smiled, touched his cheek. Absolutely. Because that's what I wanted now. Simplicity. Sunshine. Melted ice cream and lakeside laughter. The big battles were over. The rest of our life could be small, sweet, and ordinary, and I'd treasure every second of it. Marcus started building a new fence in the backyard, not because we needed it, but because he wanted to make the space feel more like ours. He and Owen painted it together, bright blue, with crooked little stars Owen insisted on adding with a sponge. Every star made me feel like we'd claimed another piece of the future Adrian tried to steal. On the 1-year anniversary of the court ruling, we hosted a barbecue. Just family, friends, neighbors we'd grown close to. We lit sparklers in the backyard. Owen ran barefoot through the grass with Marcus chasing behind, laughter trailing them like music. My mother made potato salad that tasted like every childhood summer I could remember. I stood by the grill, a drink in hand, heart finally quiet. Later that night, after the guests were gone and Owen was tucked in, Marcus and I lay on the porch swing under a blanket. The stars above were real this time. No sponge paint, no child's art. Just the kind that existed before us and would outlast every shadow ever cast. Do you ever think about it? I asked quietly. He didn't ask what I meant. Sometimes. But not with fear anymore. Just perspective. I nodded, resting my head on his shoulder. She thought she won. They both did. She can keep thinking that, Marcus said. It doesn't change the fact that we're here, and they're not. And that was the truth. Because in the end, justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's silent and slow and deeply felt in the way you continue to live. In the way you laugh again. In the way your child sleeps peacefully through the night, no longer checking windows. In the way your husband builds you a fence that doesn't keep people out, but wraps your home in care. That was our final justice. Not a courtroom verdict. Not a prison beating. But this. A life rebuilt. Whole. Untouchable. And ours,